Welcome to toy-polloi. Parental guidance. This video contains scenes of Lego destruction.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and in today's video we are going to be making a little mini Star Wars diorama, or more accurately we are going to be making a Book Nook. Now if you don't know what a Book Nook is, I would suggest you go and have a look around the internet because they are all over the place and I've been seeing them for a long time thinking, do you know what, I would love to make one of those, but I want to make it Star Wars related. So today that is what we are going to do. We are going to make a Book Nook that fits inside my bookshelf, and as you can see I've already started making a prototype. So let me talk you through my plans and then we'll see if we can actually make it. So what is a Book Nook? Well, a Book Nook is a tiny little diorama that will fit on your bookshelf and is about the same size as the books that you have there. So you can see here I've actually mocked something up just to see if I can actually get it to work. It's going to be about the same size as these sort of vintage books that I collect. So the idea is that you have this little sort of diorama that's seen from one of your favourite movies. In this case it's going to be Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back, and at the back of it you have a mirror or something similar that means that it looks like it sort of goes on forever. And as you can see at the moment I've got a 45-degree angle mirror at the back, which gives you the idea that this scene carries on back round behind the books. I also want to add lights into this so that it has a nice little glow, and basically when it's on those bookshelves it just looks really cool and inviting. So that is what I want to be making today, and the scene that I have chosen is probably one of the sort of more blink and you miss it type scenes that you have in The Empire Strikes Back, and that is the trash room. When C-3PO gets blown apart, he ends up in the trash room with the Ugnaughts, and then Chewbacca manages to find him and rescue him. Well, I want to make a scene that is just that little sort of trash room, because you've got the lovely orange glow in the background from the furnace, and then there's the remains of lots of other bits of sort of Star Wars stuff all hanging around, and I have boxes and boxes of broken Star Wars vehicles and parts, and I want to use them in some special way, and this is going to be that special way. So let's have a go at building a Book Nook that looks like the trash room from The Empire Strikes Back. As I've never made one of these before, I thought the first thing to do would be to make a little mock-up, and that's exactly what I've done here. This is just some old pieces of cardboard that I've cut to sort of work out the sort of size and scale of the Book Nook that I'm going to make. And there are a couple of limitations. The first limitation is that I want it to be the size of one of these old-fashioned novels, so it needs to be as tall as this book. So that's exactly what I've done here. I've cut the side pieces to be just about the same height as that. It's obviously going to be a little bit deeper because we want to add mirrors and lights, so it's going to be about twice the depth of one of these books. And then I needed to work out how big a mirror I could put inside it, and that actually turned out to be the next limitation of making this. I bought some of these sort of fairly cheap mirrors, and they are a very specific size, and we need the mirror to be at a 45-degree angle, so that actually limits how deep the box can be, because this mirror, as you can see, is only about 160 centimeters deep. So if I put that at a 45-degree angle, that sort of determines how deep we want the box to be. So from those two measurements, this is what I've made, and you can see it sort of works. I've not really stuck it together properly at the moment, but you can see there's a mirror at the back which is at a 45-degree angle, and I've just roughly worked out where I'm going to put the furnace part, and that's actually just sort of half a piece because obviously it is mirrored, and it means that if we drop figures in here you can see them reflected in the 45-degree mirror. So anything we put in this room will actually look like it's going around the corner, but as we turn this box you won't be able to see anything but the inside of the box. You can't see the sort of the outside world. It will always look like you're looking into this little Star Wars mini diorama. So that is my basic setup. I'm just going to make this out of a few pieces of styrene sheet, and the important thing is I get this mirror stuck in the right place so that we do get that nice 45-degree angle. And then after that I will start blocking in some of my sort of shapes and pieces that I want to take from the original room that you see in Star Wars. I'm going to make a little plinth at the back so that we have a slight raised section, because it would be nice to have figures at different heights. Then you can see the furnace piece on the back wall there. Now I need to add sort of shelves and things on either side, and generally just lots of bits of rubbish and debris. And I also want to add some lights at the top so we get a nice light shining down. It's really just sort of rough ideas at the moment as to how this is going to work. So I think the first thing to do is actually just cut all of these pieces out of styrene sheet and start seeing what it looks like. Then I'll then start building in the little plinth piece and making sort of brackets to hold everything together. But the other thing that I have to bear in mind is at some point I've got to paint this. So I obviously don't want the mirror in when I paint it, and it's probably going to be easier to paint it all as separate panels and then stick them together at the end. So I've got to make all of these pieces as flat pieces that do actually fit together. It's just going to be a little bit awkward to do. So let's start building and see what happens. And now we have that mock-up built out of 1mm styrene sheet, and this has certainly given me a lot of hope that this project is going to work. The basic structure is there. I've actually put a little plinth in that you can see there. If I remove R2D2, you can see there is a little raised section at the back, and I think that is going to make quite a big difference because it means we can have some figures at different heights. Now though, I have realised from building this that actually the project's going to be fairly complicated and going to have to be done in lots of stages, because as I mentioned, I want to add lights along the way, and I can see that getting those lights in and then getting everything built and everything painted is going to be a fairly awkward process. So I've decided what I'm going to do is actually build it out of two L-shaped pieces. I'm going to use this wall and the floor as one L-shaped piece, and I'm going to do the roof and the right-hand wall as the other L-shaped piece. I can build those two separately, get everything stuck in, get all of the wiring put in place, and also get it painted. And then once everything is painted, I can stick the two pieces together. I think that's going to be the easiest way to do it. So the next stage is actually going to be starting to add some lights, and I'm going to deal with the lights on the back section first. So the lights on the back section will be the little sort of furnace part. I still need to build that. That's going to be the next job that I've got to build. And for the lights, I have these three LEDs. These are orange flickering LEDs, so they should give a nice sort of fiery effect, and I want to build those around the hole that I make. If you recall, in the little mock-up, I'd actually put a single piece of cardboard at the back with a hole in it. So I think three lights around that will give quite a nice glow. So those will be at the back, and to activate the lights obviously you need a battery and a switch. The battery, no problem, I can put behind the mirror because there's going to be lots of space there. The switch though, I'd like near the front so that I don't have to take the Book Nook out all the time that I want to switch the lights on. So I've actually started building something that I think is going to work. Just out of a few little bits of offcuts of styrene, I've made this little box. So you can see there's a switch on this side, and on this side it looks sort of kind of Star Warsy. And I'm going to be able to stick that there and then have some wires going along the side, sort of hidden away in all of the other sort of rough details and bits of rubbish that are around. But that will be quite a nice way of hiding the switch. So I'll just be able to put my finger in there, switch it on and off, and all of the lights will come on. And because I started making this, I thought I'd also make one other thing just in a rough state, just to try and work out where everything's going to go. So I've also made this little piece here, which is what C3PO is sort of found on this little travelator type thing. So this has just been made again out of just some offcuts of styrene sheet. I've started to put a few details on it just to make it look a bit Star Warsy. And this top section here is actually made out of the remains of a couple of pens and again some bits of styrene. You can see that's starting to look pretty Star Warsy. I'm not going to copy the reference from Star Wars too much because obviously I've got to rework it to fit in here, and I also want it to look a little bit like a toy. So this is my sort of interpretation of that. And now that I've built that, that gives me a good idea of where I can place it. I was initially thinking I'd have it in the middle, but that's going to take up too much space. I think off to one side means I can have the remains of C3PO sitting on there, and then all sorts of figures sort of sitting around it. There will be some lights from the top lighting down as well. So this has given me a really good sort of starting point. The next stage, though, as I say, is to start to put in some lights and some more details. Also, before I start working on any of these panels, I'm going to use my scribe to scribe in some sort of detail lines so that they're not just flat pieces of styrene. I am then going to start sticking bits of detail on them as well, but scribing in some lines so there's a little bit of sort of basic detail should make quite a big difference. So let's get on with some more building. I'll start with the little furnace bit at the back, then we'll start sorting out adding some wiring and hiding it along the side somewhere, and then yeah, we'll see how it looks at that point. So after what seems like quite a lot of sort of fiddly little bits of work, I've got something that's starting to look like what I want. As you can see, I have stuck the switch on here. So this is the front of the Book Nook, and I've wired in just a couple of wires, which will go all the way along to the back, because we're going to be hiding the electronics at the back. And those wires are just going to look like a little bit of detail on the wall. I've also scored in all of the lines. So you can see there's some sort of panel lines on all of these panels. And if I put these two pieces together, you can start to see what this is going to look like. So this will be the mirror here, and this is the sort of first of the L-shaped walls. I've also made the little furnace wall, which is going to go here. We only need half of this because the rest of it will be mirrored in the mirror, which will be along this angle here. So I think that is going to work, and it's certainly starting to look like the sort of trash room that I wanted it to. The next thing I need to do is to sort out how I'm going to fix the lights, which will all go behind here. I've actually just done some quick wiring. I've bought these flickering orange LEDs off eBay. These are pre-wired ones, so you can see that they are flickering there. I think they're going to look really pretty nice. They're going to give the same sort of orangey glow that I'm hoping for. And I need to mount these just around the back of this somehow. I'm going to make a bracket again just out of some styrene sheet and make sure that they're all drilled in. And again, all of this will be hidden behind here. So the switch will be wired into these in the end, and I'll be able to switch it on at the front. I'm going to have to do some masking because you can actually see these LEDs shining through this piece of styrene sheet. But yeah, the next thing is just to make this little mounting frame. And then I think I'm probably going to be at the stage that I can glue all of these pieces together, because this side of the L basically be ready to go. And then I can start adding all of the details and sort of little bits of technology and greebles and all sorts of things onto this wall to make it look more cluttered and more like the trash room. But let's get the sort of mountings for these LEDs made, and we'll put everything together and see how it looks. So here's the little bracket that I've made. It's just 3 bits of styrene with the 5mm holes drilled in it, because these are 5mm size LEDs, and you can see from the front you can't see them. You'll be able to possibly see them in the reflection, so maybe I'll have to put something around, but I'm hoping that you won't see them too much. So the next thing to do is actually just to roughly tape all of this together. I'm just going to use some sort of sellotape just to put everything in place, and then we can check it's working, because I don't want to glue anything at the moment, just in case I need to make some alterations. You can see I've cut a few little notches in this sort of raised plate as well. That little notch there is for the wires from the switch, just so that they sort of neatly hide in there. And that little notch there is for the cables from these new LEDs, so that they will go underneath that and then will come out at the back here. And this, as I say, is where all of these sort of batteries and bits are going to be. So yeah, I think that's going to work. But let's tape it together quickly just to check that everything actually does look as good as I'm hoping it does. Okay, so here is everything roughly taped together, just to give myself an idea of if it's actually going to work. And I think it is really going to work very nicely. It's quite hard to see here with the filming lights on, so if I switch off some of my filming lights, make this room a little bit darker, you'll get more of a sense of what's going on. So you can see the mirror is reflecting that sort of furnace section, and we've got a really nice glow going on in there. I think that's going to look really cool. Obviously everything is a bit sort of loose and floppy at the moment, but it just gives me enough of an idea that what I've built here is actually going to work. So the next thing to do really is to start putting all the details on all of these walls, sort of bits of technology and pipes and all sorts of things, just to make it look more like the trash room. And once I've got that on, then I can stick these pieces together finally, and that will be the first of these sort of L-shaped pieces to go. The wiring is still quite messy, but that's because we're going to have to do more wiring to get some lights up here on the second L section. But overall, that is looking really nice. So let's start making some sort of bits of technology and things to stick on the walls. I'm going to use bits of Lego, bits of sort of offcuts of styrene, some sprues from some model kits, and maybe even some broken bits of Star Wars toys just to add sort of details around them. Let's get messing about and see what we can make. After an awful lot of cutting, gluing, welding, plastic destruction, Lego destruction, I've got all the pieces ready. I sort of believe that I can actually put this left-hand part together. It's all looking pretty nice. So this is the sort of back furnace wall. I've just put a few bits of detail on here. You can see there's a couple of bits of Lego here that by the time they're painted will look nice. I think that might be a Lego telephone or something like that. There's some other Lego pieces there just to add details. Some bits of offcuts of wire, just again to add some detail to it. Same goes for the side wall. This is sort of mainly sort of bits of Lego, bits of styrene, just chopped up to make interesting patterns. I put one little shelf here because the actual sort of trash room has quite a lot of shelves in it. I'm not going to have a huge amount of space for shelves because it's such a tight space, but I thought that was quite nice, and I can stick some bits of Star Wars sort of debris on it. But overall, I'm really happy with how that's looking. The little panel lines have worked really well. Those were just done with my scribe. And yeah, I think everything is about ready to go together. You'll notice on this floor section, I've just added this little block piece. That's actually not going to be seen, but what that's for is to hold the little conveyor belt piece in place because I want to paint that one separately. It's going to be a lot easier to paint that separately outside of the room. So putting that little block there means I can just slot that on and it sort of stays in place. So yeah, the next thing to do is actually put this all together, which is going to be a fairly fiddly process. I've got to make sure I put everything in the right order because obviously I need these cables to come out of the back section. Yeah, it's just going to be a little bit awkward to do, but I'm hoping I've sort of planned ahead enough that I can glue everything in place and it should just hold together. I also need to make sure that everything is really nice and square and straight because we've got to stick the other piece on as well. But as you can see, that is really starting to look very Star Warsy. Even though it's not painted, it's just got enough detail on there that I think it's going to work. So let's glue this piece together and see what it looks like. Right, that was actually quite terrifying sticking it all together because I wasn't quite sure if it would all fit. There were a couple of minor little gaps, one of which I've had to cover with an extra piece of styrene, but it just adds to the sort of the general sort of rough and tumble look of this room. So I'm not too worried about that. But as you can see, now I put it sort of roughly together, it is really starting to look very nice. I'm so happy with how this is turning out. You can really get a feel of what I'm working towards. The lights at the back do make quite a big difference. We still need to add lights at the front here, or at the top at least, sort of shining down, but you get an overall view of what is going to happen. So the mirror at the back just gives you that sort of extended view, so it looks like things are going on around the corner. Yeah, I'm just really pleased with how this is working. So I've now got to build the next piece, which is this right hand wall. That doesn't really require that much sort of detail adding to it because there's not a huge amount of space there. So I'll put a few more sort of little greeblies on, bits of Lego and bits of styrene just to build that up. But I need to build this top section and work out how I'm going to put the lights in. So again, it's just going to be a couple of LEDs. I've got some 5mm white LEDs, which I want to put sort of one near the front and one sort of towards the back, just so it lights downwards. I need to build a little sort of encasement for them and then take the wires over to the back, and then we'll have to turn it all around and sort of work out how to get all of those wires to sort of put together. At the moment this switch at the front does absolutely nothing, it's not wired in at all, but at least it's there. But yeah, I'm so happy with how this is looking. So let's get on and work out how to build the top where the lights go, and then we're getting closer to the end. But I'm really so pleased with how this is looking already. Even unpainted, it's quite an exciting thing to see. So this is what I've made for the top light section. So it's basically a box with an angled front just to make it look a bit more interesting. The back section is fairly complicated just because it has to fit in with all the 45 degrees of the back wall and the mirror. And then I've got a bit of perspex here with two LEDs behind it, mounted on a piece of a white styrene. And I've just sort of roughed up the surface of the perspex so it's got a slightly opaque look to it. And it does produce a really nice light. I've, again, very basically wired these up. So again, these will need to be sort of wired properly in the end. But if I plug those in, you can see we've now got two LEDs that do cast a really nice bright light. So I'm now at the point where I can sort of put everything together and test it. If it all works, then I'm actually going to plastic weld this onto this sidewall here. So we'll end up with a piece that looks like that. So it's the inverse L section, and then we can test everything together. But I'm hopeful that this is going to work pretty well. So that piece will get plastic welded onto there. I've just made a sort of very simple corner bracket here, just so that we keep everything nice and straight, because obviously we want everything at nice 90-degree angles, but I can plastic weld that on. So I'm just going to do one final test, and I'll then show you what it looks like.
Toy, Polloi.
And here we go. Here's the first time with everything put together, and I'm really pleased with how this is turning out. I can see a few little issues with it, which I will be dealing with in the second part of this project, but for now I think this first section is all done. As you can see, everything is working. The lights at the back are looking really nice. I think the lights at the top are a little bit too bright. Having two LEDs up there is really sort of washing out the scene, so I will be coming back to that in the second part. I've got a couple of ideas of how to soften those lights, so yeah, that's definitely something that we will be dealing with in the second part of this project. And obviously I need to paint everything as well, because at the moment it's just made out of grey plastic and bits of Lego, and it doesn't look very Star Wars. So that's another thing that we'll be dealing with in the second part. And currently all of the wiring is a little bit messy around the back. The switch that I've installed at the front there doesn't work. That is still not wired in, so we need to fix all of that up. But as far as the first part of this project goes, I am really happy with how this is looking. It actually looks better than I expected, and the mirror at the back really does make a massive difference. It looks like the Book Nook carries on around behind all of the books. It's going to be so nice when this is all finished. So I do need to say a massive thank you to my Patreons, because without their support, projects like this wouldn't happen. And if you'd like to help support this channel, then do check out my Patreon page. I will put a link to that in the description. You get early access to all of my restoration videos, plus access to an exclusive video series called On the Cutting Mat, plus other behind the scenes images and information. So thanks to everybody for watching. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video, and I'll see you in the next part of this project.
Thanks for watching Toy-Polloi. Subscribe for more great videos.